Every game needs a playing field. Well, the game of sales is no different. And if you're playing without a playing field, you're playing at a disadvantage. By using the compass, we can begin to actually draw what we call the playing field. And I'll do this in 3 parts. The first part's going to be this. It's going to begin by revisiting what we call the change model and understanding how people make decisions towards change and how we use that change model to build the red flag compass. So you can see up on the compass, you can see up at the 12 o'clock position, this is where the client is satisfied. Now you look carefully and you'll see the 5 phases that we talked about. The 5 phases that every human moves through and during that process of making decisions towards change. Everybody starts at 12 o'clock in the satisfied position, at least according to the model. And now the buyer has a change in thinking. And this occurs where? Over at the 3 o'clock position. Here the client's aware of the problem. And at this point, they move to this processing, the understanding of the cost, the consequences, and the risks of staying the same. In other words, staying status quo. And then this process leads to the big decision, whether they even want to fix it or not. And you can see this happening down in the 6 o'clock position. And remember, if they decide they want to fix it because they've said no to remaining status quo, then they move into options, which is positioned over at the 9 o'clock position. Now let's move to the second point. What I just illustrated was the entire evolution of how people make decisions towards change. Now let's link it to your sales and marketing efforts, from the time someone meets you to the time they decide to work with you. In this illustration, you can see the conventional perspective. This is the conventional way people view the sales cycle. It's being linear. It's moving from left to right, from the time someone meets you to the time they decide to work with you. Well, that entire cycle is a decision towards change. And it too can be mapped using the red flag compass. But before we go to the compass, let me use this old linear model to illustrate this. There are actually 4 questions the buyer is asking as they move from the left to the right. Do I even have a problem that I don't know about? How big is the problem? What's the cost, the consequence, and the risk if I stay status quo? And the 4th is who's impacted. See, in this model, the problem with it, there's no playing field. There's no mile markers. And this makes it difficult to understand where the sale is and at what point these questions are even being asked. My point is it matters. You'll be the judge of that. So if we go back to the line, we can break it down more simply by illustrating the 3 distinct phases of the decision towards change, which again is a decision to buy. The 3 decisions are this: why should I change? Why should I change now? And why should I change with you? Here's the translation. Why should I change what I'm doing? I've been pretty successful up until now. Why should I change now? In other words, what's the urgency? And finally, why should I do it with you? There's no way you're the only provider. So why is your firm the right firm to help fix my problem? Now, bringing back the red flag compass, looking at the compass, we can see the playing field and it can be clearly marked, and you can now play the game completely differently and effectively and have different conversations. Let's map it out. Starting at 12 o'clock position, moving to the 3 o'clock position, we call this quadrant 1. In quadrant 1, the buyer's asking, why should I change? Do I have a problem that I don't know about? Now let's keep going. Let's move from the 3 o'clock position to the 6 o'clock position. We're going to call this one, you got it, quadrant 2. And in quadrant 2, the question is, what's the cost, the consequence, or the risk if I stay status quo? What's the impact if I don't do anything? In other words, the buyer is asking, why should I be changing now? And finally, we move from the 6 o'clock position to the 9 o'clock position and label this, you got it, quadrant 3. And in quadrant 3, the buyer's finally asking, why are you the right fit?